All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another edition of our Franchise Your Business webinar series. My name is Tom DuFore. I'm the founder and CEO of Big Sky Franchise Team. And as we launch this live session, I know that a few folks are loading into the session here. So if you're new to our episode or new to the podcast and webinar here, today's session is current franchise sales and marketing trends. It's the May edition where we look back at some of the data from the month of April and other economic conditions and factors that might be impacting your franchise sales efforts, lead generation, and so on. So there's a lot of data and information out there, and we'd like to just start talking through and going through some different things to see what that all looks like. So I will share my screen. And before I do, one quick note here. Let me just go ahead and click. We do have our other podcast. It's called Multiply Your Success. Multiply Your Success. We're coming up on 4 years of that podcast. We have over 200 episodes. We've got some great guests. This week's episode is all about how to create a successful internship program. So I thought that was very timely with graduations around the country starting to commence. Anyway, it's episode 206, and it's from the Multiply Your Success podcast. So with that, let's go ahead. I'll share my screen and we'll jump right into this. And this session in particular, I share a lot of data quickly and then try to help dissect and go through some of that here. So as we look at this, here's the podcast there that I had mentioned. The next reports we go over is from the Institute for Supply Management. The Institute for Supply Management, excuse me, they produce 3 reports each month. One is the Manufacturing PMI, or Purchasing Managers Index. The second is Services Purchasing Managers Index. And then the third and most recent report they developed is the Hospital Purchasing Managers Index. So let's go ahead and jump into the Manufacturers Purchasing Index. And it says the U.S. manufacturing sector contracted in April as the manufacturing PMI registered 49.2%, down 1.1 percentage points compared to March's reading of 50.3%. After breaking a 16-month streak of contraction with an expansion in March, the manufacturing sector dropped back into contraction. Only 1 out of the 5 sub-indexes that directly factor into the manufacturing PMI is in expansion territory, down from 2 in March. So what does this mean? Well, for me, I like the manufacturing PMI because I believe it to be a leading indicator to see where things are going. So we can see that roughly the last 6-8 months or so, we see manufacturing's been on the upswing a little bit. You can almost kind of see a trend line if you're looking on my screen and seeing my cursor move. So it's trending up with a little dip here, but trending up to that 50%. And that 50% is the manufacturing economy break-even line. And 42.5% is the overall economy break-even line. So it's good to see this trending up. Hopefully we can hopefully it pops back over that 50%. But in my opinion, and based off of this data here, what I think is this is that teetering of the economy where lots of businesses I work with and talk to, you'll see, some that are kind of right over, right under, but they're moving, they're chugging along, going forward. What does this mean? Well, to me, it means that things are starting to hopefully start to trend upward for the overall economy. Things are maybe starting to break a little bit, but we're still kind of hanging right around this middle point. Okay, chart number 2, services economy. Okay, so services, it says, this is for the Services Purchasing Manager Index, and it says in April, the services PMI registered 49.4%, a 2 percentage point decrease compared to the March reading of 51.4%. A reading above 50% indicates the services sector economy is generally expanding. Below 50% indicates it is generally contracting. A services PMI above 49% over time generally indicates an expansion of the overall economy. Therefore, the April services PMI indicates the overall economy is growing for the 16th consecutive month. Okay, so again, it's right over that break-even line. It's right around that marker that we've seen this trend at. So the services is hovering right around that break-even, similar to where we're seeing the manufacturing PMI, and certainly the services economy is, or services segment is the largest segment of the U.S. economy. And then we have the hospital purchasing managers index, and we'll jump to the second paragraph here, and it says the hospital PMI registered the hospital registered 53.5% in April, a 1.2 percentage point increase from the March reading of 52.3%, indicating an eighth consecutive month of growth for a contraction after a contraction in August of last year. Just worth noting here that we still see the hospital PMI growing, and they added this report certainly as healthcare continues to be a large segment and percentage of the overall economy here in the U.S. So just some broad economic factors. You can see it's around that 50%, around that kind of that break-even marker. And so to me, that's part of the sense that I get when I talk to people, that things are in some cases they're going well but not great, or they're going okay but not poorly. So it's kind of around that middle marker, which is pretty consistent to what we see. Okay, let's take a look at the unemployment rate. So April unemployment was 3.9%. This is from tradingeconomics.com, the United States unemployment rate. And it says here the unemployment rate in the United States edged up to 3.9% in April of 2024 from 3.8% in the previous month, and surprising market expectations, which had forecasted the rate to remain unchanged. The number of unemployed individuals increased by 63,000 to 6.492 million, while employment levels went up by 25,000 to reach 161.491 million. Additionally, the labor force participation rate was unchanged at 62.7%, and the employment population ratio decreased to 60.2% from 60.3%. So I think that's interesting and worth noting to see what we're seeing here. But it's interesting that the employment levels went up 25,000. So, and unemployed individuals increased 63,000. So for me, when I look at that, it leads me to conclude that while hiring increased, it looks like the number of unemployed went up. So more folks are maybe entering into the workforce here, or the job search as we're going into it. Nonetheless, I mean, as we look at that 3.9, 3.8 to 3.9%, all in all, still relatively low, but it means for potential employers or budding franchisees at 3.9% that there are people out there to hire. You know, there are employees that are available for them to be thinking about. So if you're the franchise sales person or marketing folks, you know, this data is an indicator to me that says there are people out there looking for work, and you're likely to find some quality staff. Okay, now we're going to take a look at the annual inflation rate. This is from tradingeconomics.com for the United States inflation for the CPI, or Consumer Price Index. And it says the annual inflation rate in the U.S. eased to 3.4% in April 2024 from the 3.5% in March, which was the highest reading since September of last year, in line with market forecasts. So basically what we're seeing, I'm going to scroll down. If you're watching live online here, you can see my screen, and you can see that for April is 3.4%, March was 3.5% inflation rate, February 3.2%. And keep in mind, this inflation rate is for this month, for example, is 3.4% over what the inflation rate was last year at this time. So if I were to look at, let's just say, the 5-year inflation rate, you can see how this really spiked and has been coming down, but it's stayed pretty steady in those mid threes, right? The mid around 3.5% ish zone for you to see, and prior to that, you see the inflation was well below 3% for 2 years prior to COVID, and the increase in government spending that occurred. So we can see what that looks like here. So anyway, what does this mean? Well, to me, the inflation rate has, for the most part, been pretty steady. If we look back over the course of the last roughly year, April of 2023 was 4.9%, and then May of 23 was 4.1%, and then by June it was down at 3%, and it's stayed relatively in that zone between 3 and 4% here for coming up on almost a year. So I'm sure the inflation's not quite where anyone would like for it to be, but it is looking like that range is starting to shrink. And so for you, that's something, if you're talking to prospective franchisees or even current franchisees, you could share this information to them to show that it looks like it's at least leveling off. I mean, inflation's still going, prices are still going up as a whole, but at least it looks like it's a lot more stable versus these big swings like this peak here in June of 2022 at 9.1%. Okay. Next is the Index of Consumer Sentiment that's put out by the University of Michigan. This is from the University of Michigan website, Surveys of Consumers. This is a 50-year Index of Consumer Sentiment. And so you can see here it looks like we're right under about 80 for the index value, just under 80. And this bottom out here in about 2023, and you see it rising back up and on a pretty steady, consistent climb up that we're looking at here. So I think that's worth noting. What does this mean for prospective franchise buyers? Well, to me, what this means is that the consumer is getting more confident in general about making purchases, about buying things. So there are two things to take from this. Number one, this probably means that if you're in franchise sales, it's a little bit easier to get to a yes with your prospective buyer. Maybe a few less objections in the sales cycle, or maybe even reducing that time window by maybe a few days or a few weeks or maybe a couple months, depending on how long they've been in the sales pipeline. And then for a prospective franchisee, if for things to communicate to them, you could use this to share that, things are on the up, they're growing. You can see where this sentiment is, and you might even show them if you'd like to. If you don't want to show that's the 50-year, let's just pull up the 10-year real quick. And so you can see this 10-year, it's a little bit more narrow, but you can see that the timeline is starting to get a lot closer to where it was in the back in even as long ago as 2014, 10 years ago. It's starting to get closer to that number, just where that was, and on its way, just this slow, steady climb. You see it's kind of goes up, and it's some zigzags, but you can see the steady trend here. You can see a trend line that's pretty easy to kind of see as you're looking through that or looking at this here on the screen. Okay, next up is one of my favorite charts, which is from census.gov. This is about new business applications that have been formed and total new business applications. So in April of 2024, there were 432,517 new business applications. That's down 0.5% from March. But overall, you can see here that consistently, we've been over 400,000 new business applications since 2021, and even right before that, toward the tail end of 2020 on this chart. So coming up here on, goodness, almost 4 years that it's been at or right around or just over that 400,000 new business applications. And you can see pre-2020, it was right around 300,000. So that's a large increase comparatively to where it was beforehand, and it's been steady. So what does this mean? Well, to me, for someone in franchise development, franchise marketing, this means that the general inquiry, the person who's inquiring, has new business startup on their mind. They're thinking about they're thinking about starting a business. And if they're talking to you about your franchise, well, chances are that they're thinking about buying they're thinking your franchise opportunity provides them the pathway to start their own business for self-employment. So to me, it's like, is there something in the water? That phrase or saying people will say. And to me, thinking about this, yes, there is something in the air or something in the water that says people are interested in self-employment and they want to go into business for themselves, and they're starting businesses and they're doing things. And this is a trend that has been very consistent for coming up on 4 years. It's not showing an indication that it's dropping. We see that there was a little bit of a peak here toward mid 2023. It has dropped a little bit here into 2024, but we're still over 430,000 new business applications. So we'll see how that continues to go. But just know that when people are reaching out to you, talking to you, that they are interested, that they likely, you have to go into the discussion. This is what I'm trying to say. Go into the discussion presuming that they are genuinely interested in starting a business, and positioning your franchise opportunity as a solution for them and how that solves the problem of going into business for themselves. So keep that in mind when you're talking to these candidates. Okay, next up is from franchiseinsights.com, which is owned by Franchise Ventures. They have the Small Business Startup Sentiment Index. I love this Startup Sentiment Index. It gives us just a nice window into the behavior, the minds, the sentiment, as it's called, of budding or aspiring entrepreneurs. And it says here, a caption at the top at the top of this chart says, "Aspiring franchisees still upbeat, but fewer exuberant about 3 to 6 months out. 77.1% say business conditions are the same or better in 3 months." And baby boomers and Gen Z rise in share of pool of interest. So that's the initial heading here. So we'll scroll down to a couple charts that I'd like to make sure we take a look at here. So it says, this says 88% of the respondents expect their startups within 12 months. So 88% of them are looking to start within 12 months. 31.3% said they look to start their business in the next month. 28.9% in the next 2 to 3 months. So that's basically about 50% of the respondents said they're looking to start in the next 90 days, essentially, or next 3 months, which means that if you're talking to prospects, that means half of them, for your new leads that are coming in right now, half of them are thinking about buying and starting the business in the next 3 months. So have a sense of urgency. It's a coin flip in terms of if they're looking at the next 3 months or later than the next 3 months. 4 to 6 months out from now is 12% of the respondents. 7 to 12 months out is 15.7%, and 12% say that they don't know when they're going to, or it's more than a year. Okay. Funding is still the key. 63% see funding as the biggest factor, but only 37.3% see funding as harder. So I always think that this chart is critical to see. Is you can see this nice little bar chart. I like how they reorganize this into a horizontal bar graph, and it says 62.7% say that funding or access to credit is the biggest factor that will impact their decision in starting a business over the course of the next 6 months. 41% said the economic climate. So this session here, right? The goal is to help give you information and tools to be able to provide data and information to help the franchise candidate better understand the economic climate that they're looking to go into. And as with all things, the economic conditions are constantly changing, and it's almost all macro data that no one person has any control over. Outside of maybe the chairman of the Federal Reserve that can really dictate interest rates and certain things like that. But That's one person. So outside of that, everything else are these macro factors that we have such little to no control over. So economic climate, being armed with this information to be able to share and showcase and talk about how your brand is addressing these issues or is able to support franchisees with these challenges or issues that are going on in the economy, well, that's going to help put their mind at ease. Okay, so 62.7% funding or access to credit. Well, as a franchisor, there are lots of great third-party franchise lenders out there and groups that can help support with that. If you don't have one, there are great referral partners. Reach out to me. Be happy to send you a list of some of the franchise folks we refer out, all reputable franchise organizations that have been around for a long time in the franchise community. Then economic climate, and then everything else is just a distant third and beyond from there. The stock market is 18.1%. Tax law changes 16.9%. Political changes 13.3%. Other 13.3%, and regulatory changes 9.6%. So as you look at these for this month, this is what's on their minds: access to funding and the economic climate. So access to funding, find that lender if you don't have one, or a referral organization to work with. And economic climate, keep checking this out. Make sure you're watching this every month. We do one every single month. So we'll do one again in June as well, and next month. So I think this is important data. And then the other part that I'd like to talk through, or other piece of this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, see if we can see this a little bit easier here, is what percentage of the demographic, what percentage of people by age are looking at starting up a business right now. So 27% of buyers for this most recent survey in April are baby boomers, 27%. And that's a pretty big uptick from the last 4 or 5 months or so. It's the biggest number in about 6 months. So just know that about 25% of buyers, right, 27% of buyers are likely to be boomers. Our largest percent is Gen X, which has been for a long time now, many years. And Gen Xers are at 43.2%. Millennials, or Generation Y, at 23%, and Gen Z is at 7%. Gen Z is at 7% of buyers. So just worth noting, we see Gen Z's kind of starting to trend to have a bigger share, and boomers, while overall, from compared to 5-6 years ago, is on the decline, is still hanging around that 20 to 30% range of potential buyers. So just worth noting for the types or age of folks that are going to be coming in and talking to you. Okay. Here's a new report that was produced that just came out. It was released May 15th, so it was released last week. And the question they asked is, can the franchise sales process be improved? Just ask prospects. And so they said, the question was, how would you rate your overall experience with the franchises you inquired about? And this was a mystery shopping survey that they did 6 months ending in April of 2024. And so what it showed is that 12.2% said that they were very satisfied. 38.7% said they were satisfied. 31.7% said neither satisfied nor unsatisfied. So just kind of, it was fine, right? In the middle. 8.3% said unsatisfied, and 9.1% said very unsatisfied. So if we look at the numbers, roughly about half of all respondents said that they were satisfied or very satisfied. So, hey, good job, business development, franchise development folks out there. That's pretty good. But that also means that 50% were either in the middle or unsatisfied, and to some degree, which means we have opportunity to grow and improve. So neither satisfied nor unsatisfied was about 30%, right? So about 30% said, it was just fine. It was, not great or weak. It was just fine. So there's a big segment for improvement. And then roughly about, what is that, 18% or so said that they were unsatisfied or very unsatisfied. So the nice thing is that the smallest segment is unsatisfied or very unsatisfied. So good job, franchise development and franchise marketing folks out there. Good job. Truly, thumbs up. Hey, that's a report card, something maybe to show your boss or somebody to say, look, as a whole, on average, if you want to make it look good, you say about 80% of folks, or you could say only roughly, less than 20% were unsatisfied. 80% were either in the middle or satisfied or better. So, overall that's good, but gives us some opportunity to improve as well. Right. So just a little note there. Thought that was worth showcasing. And then this one is from May 8th from franchiseinsights.com by Michael Alston and Franchise Insights. What I find interesting is he shows that 15 to 26% of aspiring franchisees already own at least one business. That's what the data's shown for the last 4 years, that the range of prospective business owners or new startups, 15 to 26% of them on average, or as a typical range, are current business owners. So that means, you just kind of split the middle of that. About 1 out of every 5 franchise inquiries is likely to be an existing business owner of some kind. And so Franchise Insights said, well, what kind of businesses do they own? What do they already own? I thought this was an interesting data point. So what it shows is that only 2.3% own a franchise. So these aspiring franchisees, only 2.3% own an existing franchise. I thought that was interesting. 79.5%, or round up for 80% of these folks, were non-franchise businesses, or what I would consider as independents. You'll hear that phrase a lot. So independents, and then 18.2% were business opportunities, where that's kind of in between an independent and a franchise, right? Just another business opportunity. So what does that mean? Well, to me, that means that someone coming in, that if they're an existing business owner, that they likely have never owned a franchise before. And so in one regard, that's a plus, because it gives you the chance to educate them on the benefits of owning a franchise. On the other hand, if they've been running an independent business, which they likely have been, and even in a business opportunity, they have flexibility to run the business model the way they would like to. They might be a maverick entering into your system. So, right, we want to be cautious and making sure that they're going to be willing to and actually follow through on executing your systems and processes, number one. On the other hand, if they've opened up their own business, they're no stranger to risk in starting a business. And so starting up a business, they're going to be comfortable with. And so explaining to them, I think an important component for the business owners, for these non-franchise owners that are buying in, I think something for you that's worthwhile mentioning to these buyers is that your franchise system that they're considering or looking to buy into is going to help them ramp up faster than what they did when they started their own independent business. And so very, very often, I've heard the story many times from founders, they kind of bootstrap, kind of get it going and get it, figure it out to get their business started and rolling. But with a franchise, they don't have to do that. Right. So with a franchise, they know exactly what to invest and where to spend that money to help reduce the complexity and challenges of starting up and operating and turning the business to successful operations quickly. So to me, that's the takeaway for out of this report for the week. One other quick note, Fran Connect published a blog. This was back in March. Okay, sorry, I'm a few months behind on this one. But the blog title is How Your Franchise Fee Structure Can Enhance Franchise Performance. This is March 20th, 2024. One thing I found interesting, especially for new franchisors or emerging franchisors out here, it says royalties equate to stronger support. And so they did a survey of, let's see here. They did a comprehensive study of over 2,400 franchise disclosure documents over a 2-year period, sheds great light on focusing on how varying fee structures, including franchise fees, royalties, tech fees, and marketing costs, can impact the franchise performance and growth. What I found interesting is that they found that the average royalty fee stands at 6%, and that their study reflects a consistent approach across a variety of verticals. They found 80% of franchise brands are charging royalties within a median value of 2%. So essentially, they're looking at somewhere between the median value there of somewhere between 4 to 8% is where 80% of franchise brands are charging for their royalty. So I found that interesting to point out. You can read through this for the rest of the report there. Boxwood Partners is they are a merger and advisory company and organization, and I like to show that last month in April they had 3 deals that they did. That they published, at least that they made an announcement on. And I just like keeping track with them as just kind of a barometer for what's going on in the general industry for franchises and franchise related either mergers, acquisitions, etc. So we're seeing 3 deals done by this group. To me, that's just a nice little snip indicator to say that deals are still happening. They're still popping. So just know that we continue to see venture capital, private equity groups, and so on continue to grow into franchising. The last thing here, this is the franchiseinsights.com. And this is their business opportunity category. I've been showing this, for about 6 months or so now, because this looks much like what the franchise category went to when I was looking at the franchise section. They've got business opportunities and other things that are listed. So I think they've swapped these categories out. I keep forgetting to message over to their team there to confirm that. I need to do this. So we're just going to look at this. The top 10 categories. Home services was number 1 at 23.7%. And what they do is they look at the last 90 days out of the total leads or inquiries that have come in over the last 90 days. They break it down by percentage share by category or industry. So home services had 23.7% of the leads, business services 14.5%, senior and health 13.7%, cleaning and maintenance 13.5%, food at 7.3%, education 4.3%, pet services 4.2%, retail 3.4%, financial services 3.2%, and child related at 2.4%. So what does this mean? Well, if you're in one of these top 10 categories, what it likely means is it's going to be easier to find franchise candidates right now. Okay, that's to me what this generally means. And the lower the number it is, it becomes even easier out of that top 10. If you're not in this top 10, well, what that means is you might have to be plugged into a bunch of different lead sources to generate those leads. So with that, this was a little bit longer than possible. Thank you all for hanging in here. I'd love to open it up for any questions, comments, thoughts here as we bring this to a close. Feel free to raise your hand, type something into the Q&A or chat box here as we are live coming into Memorial Day weekend. That's why we did this on a Thursday today, knowing that the Friday before a long weekend, attendance can be a bit challenging. So I don't think I'm seeing anything come in from the audience. So thank you all for joining us. This will be published next week on our podcast, the Franchise Your Business podcast, as well as on our YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Big Sky Franchise Team. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful Memorial Day weekend honoring those who have sacrificed their lives and served our country. Thank you so much. Have a great one. Take care.